Good evening and welcome to tonight's Zoning Board of Appeals hearing. Let me introduce some members of town government that assist this board. To my left is Vincent Pizzulli, attorney to the board. To his left is Blaise Donadio, planner in the planning department. You're all here tonight seeking relief from the Smithtown zoning ordinances, and it's our job to try to help you achieve the relief you are requesting whenever possible. It's up to you to provide us with precise, accurate information so we as a board can make a decision based on the facts that you present here tonight. We as a board must consider the 5 following conditions. They're listed here for you. Number 1, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the variance. Number 2, whether the whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other means. Number 3, whether the variance is substantial. Number 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. And number 5, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. Procedures for tonight's meeting. Cases will be called in the order they are advertised. When you are called, please present your certificates of postings and mailings to Mr. Donadio. Then you will be asked to go to the podium where you'll state your name and address for the record and then proceed to tell us why you need your variance. At the end of your presentation, if anyone in the audience would like to speak on your case, they will be given 1 opportunity to do so. Then the applicant can come back to the podium to answer their concerns. Once the public hearing is closed, no further information will be accepted concerning the case. There are 3 ways to find out about your case. You can stay after the hearing, but there's no guarantee your case will be acted on tonight. We usually say call the planning office tomorrow, but due to the holiday, they're going to be short-staffed, so we're going to ask you to call the planning office on Monday. Or you can wait and be notified by mail. We do have 1 case that was withdrawn. That is case number 18263, Daniel and Catherine Safranek, 184 Old Willis Path. Was there anyone here for that? No? That has been withdrawn. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first case on the agenda, case number 18258, Jennifer and David Oxenhorn, 39 Atterbury Drive, Smithtown. The location of the property is the west side of Atterbury Drive, 429 feet west of Landing Avenue. The property is owned R21. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum side yard from 16 feet to 2 feet for a proposed 140 square foot shed. And my bad. Thank you. I do. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Hi. So I'm Jennifer Oxenhorn. Our address is 39 Town.
Right. Are you going to speak, sir?
I can speak.
Why don't you just introduce yourself anyway?
My name is Dave Oxenmore. I also live at 39 Atterbury Drive.
Thank you.
We're seeking to place our shed, I guess, in the minimum side yard area. We have is in the way of short of moving it as far back as required.
And from the front of your house, that shed is a fair distance from the front of your house, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, which is why we also didn't want to move it too far back.
Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
No question.
Planning?
No, thank you.
No, thanks.
Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thanks.
The next case on the agenda is case number 18259, Tantillo Auto Group, 943 Middle Country Road, St. James. The location of the property is the northwest corner of Middle Country Road and Hillside Avenue. The property is zoned WSI and R10. The applicant is requesting variances to permit outdoor storage as an accessory use not on the same lot as the principal use, to reduce the minimum buffer to a residence district from 50 feet to 0.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Vincent Tremarco. I represent the applicant. I've submitted the affidavit of posting and mailing and the certified returns to Mr. Donadio. I'd like to point out in the affidavit of posting, as you know, since this is a corner plot, we were required to post on Jericho Turnpike and on Hillside. The sign on Jericho Turnpike was put up on the 21st, as the affidavit indicates, but we had to go back on the 25th and replace the sign because it came down, I guess, in the rain. Also, as this board knows, there are actually required by town law 2 means of advertising. Any variance, we or this board requires 3. In any event, we did do the mailing, and also there's a posting, legal notices in the newspaper, and we did go and get the sign back up as soon as we learned that it was down. Getting to the application itself, if you look at the request, I'll go backwards, a variance to reduce minimum buffer from a residence district from 50 to 0. I guess you could note on the picture on the screen or here, we also own 70 feet of residential, which backs up to the first residential home. So in effect, we are giving the town a 70-foot buffer because we're not building on that 70-foot piece. So that's the reason for the request from 50 to 0. Actually, the town will have 70 feet, 20 feet more than is required. It'll remain foliated and treed as it exists today. The site itself and the use of outdoor storage on an accessory lot has been granted by this board at least on 2 occasions that I've represented clients. One is Bel Air Auto Shop, and that's on Jericho Turnpike down by the CVS. It's a separate lot across Jericho. Bel Air's auto body is on the south side, the separate lot's on the north side. It's fenced and maintained and was permitted by this board some years ago. Also, more recently, we came in with an application for Maserati a little further east on Jericho or Middle Country Road, asked this board for the same variance, and the board was kind enough to grant it. So it's not uncommon for dealerships to come in and ask for these types of variances because, as the board may or may not know, the whole deal of being a dealership is inventory. And the manufacturers require dealerships to hold a tremendous amount of inventory. They don't have a choice, the dealerships. Either they take it or they're no longer car dealers for that particular brand of car. At least this way, if the board desires to grant this variance, we will have to provide a site plan, show the buffers in the rear, also whatever landscaping that the town board would require when we apply to the Board of Site Plan review. We don't think this would be a change in the character of the area. If you go down Jericho Turnpike or Middle Country Road, and that whole area is basically car dealerships, car repair shops, and a few auxiliary businesses like breakfast shops, pizza places, and other food establishments. Whether what we're asking for can be achieved by another method, as I said, the only way car dealers can exist is by storing a tremendous amount of vehicles. And I think the town has a tremendous control because we, when we go for the site plan, have to do the landscaping, the sidewalks, whatever fencing we want to produce. So it's the most controlled way to allow storage. Whether the requested area variance is substantial, it's really not. We're giving you 70 feet of buffer to the first house or residential property. We are also taking into account the factors of, we're going to have to put whatever they say, curbs, sidewalks, and again, landscaping. So it is much better to have the control, at least in my opinion, than having these cars, parked behind buildings and wherever they can get space. Whether the variance will have any environmental effect, no, it's just car storage. There's no use of either water or sanitary flow. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, we're asking this board for its favorable consideration. If you have any questions, I have Carmine Grasso here, the architect of the site plan.
I was at the site yesterday. Standing at Middle Country Road, looking through, that buffer is kind of sparse. Would your client object to adding more plantings to that buffer?
Not at all.
Okay.
I have a question for you. Where is the 70 feet, the additional 70 feet that's on the residential property?
It's in the back.
Is it not on this plan?
Carmine?
If you look up at the screen, there is a highlighted area on the smaller portion of the site plan. The rear highlighted line is the zoning boundary line. From that line to the next residence to the north would be about 70 feet.
Okay, so it's not really a buffer because it's parking.
It's not a buffer, it's
Okay,
residentially zoned.
thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? No questions. Planning?
No, thank you.
Nancy, excuse me. The 70 feet is owned by my client. It
No, I
will be
see that,
kept
but
in
you were
its-
calling it a buffer, it's parking. The 70 feet of residential, so the 0 lot line here, that I was thinking that the buffer, when you say buffer, it's a tree or it's a buffer that creates something between your activity and the clients,
And
and
it-
the neighbors,
Right,
which that's not a
but
buffer.
the setback is 70 rather than,
Yeah.
rather than 50.
Yeah, I
Poor
get it.
choice of words on my part, you're
No
right.
problem.
Anything else?
No.
Nothing? Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Come on up, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Jacqueline Guidi,
Could you, okay,
Address?
99 Hillside Avenue, St. James.
could you just spell your last name for the record so we get it correctly?
The last name?
Last name,
Guidi.
thank you. Sir?
Mark Guidi, 99 Hillside Avenue, St. James.
Thank you.
Well,
We are the address across the street from this proposed. We do have a problem with, I believe, number one, it is going to change the character. It's residential. We don't live on Jericho, we live on Hillside. And to us, it's encroaching on residential. So I think we're the only ones impacted by this as residents.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, basically, the 70 feet so-called buffer is roughly that rear back corner of your 70 feet is in line with my driveway. So I have a full visual pretty much of that parking lot. And so be it, if, most likely there's going to be lights there, and it's going to definitely, impact the value of my property. I mean, if they stayed, I did speak with Mr. Blaze days ago. I believe the setback where that they don't have to, request the variance is 70 feet plus the 50. Is that correct, Blaze?
That is correct.
Over there.
They're required to have a 50-foot buffer on the
On
commercially
top of
zoned
the
portion,
70 feet.
in addition to the
Yeah.
70 feet.
So if they stayed within there, I want to be a good neighbor too. It's real, then it's going to be more towards Jericho where I will not have any visibility of it. But since they're asking for that 50 to 0, it's, I'm going to be looking at a parking lot. So it's going to really affect our quality of life and mainly our home value. So that's my concern.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if there's anyone else, Mr. Tramarko. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this application? Sir? Good evening.
Yes, good evening. My name is Jim Adams. I live at 98 Hillside Avenue, which is on the west side, if you're going north on Hillside Avenue, second house on the left.
You spell your last name, Jim, for the record?
Adams.
Thank you.
Okay. My main concern is also with Mark and his wife. And the other question I have is the parking lot going to be a parking lot, or is it going to be similar to what it is now? Right now, it's just basically, dirt. It's not paved. Is it going to be a professional job where they're going to pave the whole thing and put fences around it and whatnot? Yes?
We'll ask.
Oh, okay, I see, okay. That's my main concern.
Okay.
And as Mark, I just heard Mark expressing how, it may be a big difference in the value of our homes because of the parking lot. But also, the very important that it, looks presentable, if it's going to be. And is it really necessary for them to have that much space? Taking the commercial property and turning it into taking the residential and turning it into commercial. That's basically what they want to do, correct?
No.
No.
No. The property is what we call split zoned. The front portion of the property that abuts Middle Country Road is zoned commercial. The last 70 feet of the property is zoned residential. The applicant is proposing to use the commercially zoned portion for outdoor storage or the parking of vehicles and maintaining the 70 feet of residential in its natural state.
Oh, okay. But still, they're going to use the commercial for the parking lot as well?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So that's my concern. And how well that's going to be, maintained, as well as how it's going to be built and, paved and, fenced as well.
The town does have requirements for what we call site plan review. The Board of Site Plan Review is a board that looks at all commercial applications, and they examine things like parking, paving, curbing, irrigation, landscaping, fencing, lighting. So before this could even assuming, this board wished to approve this application, it still has to go before that board for further review. And before they could even break ground on that property, they would have to be approved by that board, and they would have to adhere to all the conditions of that board as well.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else like to be heard on this application? No one else? All right. Mr. Tramarko?
Actually, there has to be a correction. My poor choice of words was the right choice of words. I think Mr. Tanzi, by looking at that, he was right, but I spoke to the architect. The last 70 feet, which is zone residential, as Blaise just said, will remain in its natural state. There'll be no parking, no nothing, trees, and if the chairman feels that there needs to be more trees, fine, my client will plant them. So that 70 feet will remain in its natural state. I know by looking at that, it's confusing, but I blame it on the architect. It's not my fault.
Is the area going to be paved, or is it going to remain as is, which is
I'm
really
going to
dirt?
ask Carmine to answer that.
I believe that you're required to pave all area of outdoor storage. So the answer would be yes, it would be paved with curbing, with landscaping, with fencing.
So then it wouldn't be a buffer.
You know,
Well, there would be a buffer in that 70 feet.
Yeah, but it won't be a 70-foot, the plan I'm looking at shows parking. Is that not the plan, Carmine, is that not the plan?
Sure. My name is Carmine Grasso
Okay.
from Cataldo
Good morning.
Grasso Architects, offices at 14 Carl Avenue in Smithtown. Just for clarification, just this area here that is in the WSI zoning district is going to be paved. It'll be paved, have curbing, drainage, everything that's required by the town for site plan. Everything in the back area here that's zoned R10 will remain natural or have I guess, a buffer, any buffer plantings that would be required by the town as well. So this whole area, 70-foot area in the back is not paved. It's natural, and the only paved area is in the WSI zoning district.
So we're to pay attention to the small drawing, not the big drawing.
Correct. This big drawing over here, just I guess for clarification, we needed to show on the site plan the existing site of the Chevy buildings. So this whole area here is on the opposite side of Middle Country Road. It's on the south side of Middle Country Road. It's where the Chevy dealership is now, because we had to
It's
show.
much clearer now,
Yeah,
Carmine.
yeah. Thank you.
Carmine,
Yes.
are you proposing lighting on the site?
Yeah, I would assume there would be site lighting. That whole thing would be determined once we go, if this gets approved, then we go to the planning board.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Moved and second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda is case number 18260, Edward Cunningham, 152 Fifth Avenue, Kings Park. The location of the property is the west side of Fifth Avenue, 1,761 feet south of Comac Road. The property is zoned R10. The applicant is requesting a special exception to permit living quarters for parents.
Good evening.
Good evening. I don't need this probably. My name is Edward Cunningham. I reside at 152 Fifth Avenue, Kingsport, New York. Been there for just over 25 years. As stated, we are seeking a special exception for living my in-laws who will be moving in with us, whether I like it or not. But as far as, and again, I'm trying to read the questions over there. The properties around our area will actually enhance based upon the improvements that we're proposing. Yes, there is a benefit for us because we get to have our in-laws live here versus Brooklyn and be able to take better care of them. out here. The variance is substantial because we are adding, space onto the living area and then the existing garage to make it more functional for us. First effect. I don't believe, no to answer 4, no adverse effect to the environmental conditions as we're staying in the areas. We're just coming out forward in front of the house. And yes, the alleged difficulty was self-created due to the fact that we needed to, expand a little space into the existing garage to make it more easier for them to get in and out and around as they're sitting back over there. They're in their late 80s, so we wanted to make sure that move around inside the facility.
All right. You're taking your existing garage and convert it to living space,
Correct,
and then you're going to build another garage in front of the garage?
correct.
Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions on the application?
No thanks.
Planning?
Just one comment, Mr. Chairman. Planning prepared a planning advisory report. All of the board members did receive a copy of it, and after review, we did recommend approval of the application.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you.
Very much.
Mr. Chairman, the next 2 cases on the agenda are adjoining properties, which are applications that have been requested by the same applicant. So if the board would like to address both of them at the same time, I can read them both into the record before you begin.
Yeah, let's do that. Do them
Okay.
both at the same time.
The next 2 cases on the agenda are case numbers 18261 and 18262, Kismet Homes. The locations of the property are 120 4th Street on the south side of 4th Street, 136 feet east of Lincoln Avenue in St. James. The properties are zoned R10. The applicant is requesting variances for case number 18261 to reduce the minimum lot width from 75 to 60 feet for a proposed 2,305 square foot, 2-story single-family dwelling with a 494 square foot attached garage. For case number 18262, the applicant is seeking variances to reduce the minimum lot width from 75 feet to 60 feet for a proposed 2,305 square foot, 2-story single-family dwelling with a 494 square foot attached garage.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Vincent Tramarco. I represent the applicant. I've submitted both affidavits of posting and mailing to Mr. Donadio. Initially, I'd just like to point out that the property card on this particular piece of property, the building department has noted that this was a hoarder house. And when my client bought it, he had probably 6, 7, 8 dumpsters just to remove the contents of the property from the house. What my client proposes is to build 2 houses on the subject property, and the only request is the width of the property, 75 to 60, but you will also notice that each lot will be 16,000 square feet, more than 1.5 times the zoning requirement of 10,000 square feet. Additionally, the side yards of the new homes will conform to the side yard requirements of the R10 zoning. In other words, there'll be 12 and 16-foot side yards. So as far as adjoining neighbors are concerned, they're not going to be impacted any more than if it was a normal 75 by 125-foot lot with 12 and 16-foot side yards. This is certainly a desirable change in the character of the neighborhood. I think the house was not occupied for a number of years before my client purchased it, and it was left in pretty bad shape. So my client's proposal to build 2 new houses in this area will certainly be a benefit to the community and certainly not a detriment. Whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method or purpose. Well, in order to make this economically sound and reasonable, my client has met homes, Arthur Heinrich, who was built in St. James more than one time, in fact, many times, and is, in fact, a resident of St. James, proposes to build 2 houses there, which will, again, be within the character of the neighborhood. Whether the requested area variance is substantial. Not when you consider the size of the property. It just so happens that the property is long and narrow to start with. So by cutting it in half in a perpendicular line on 4th Street, it becomes a very viable 2 houses there, which will again benefit the neighborhood. Whether the proposed variance will have any adverse environmental effect, it will meet the health department approval for cesspools, and other than being a normal house with normal sanitary and water flow, there's no difference in the building of the house. Of course, there'll be 2 houses, but again, they'll each be on 16,000 square feet, not on the 10,000 required. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, I think, in fact, Mr. Heinrich, in this situation, really is benefiting the community by tearing this house down and putting 2 new houses in their place. So we ask the board for its favorable consideration. Mr. Heinrich is here tonight if you have any questions.
When you're done dividing that rear lot between the other 2 lots, the depth will be what, 264 feet?
264 feet where?
The depth?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
No, thank you.
Planning?
No, thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Come on up, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Michael Tully, Tully, 279 Lincoln Avenue in St. James. As I'm looking at that, the house does need to be torn down. There's no doubt about that. Their backyard will be in my backyard, as I'm looking at it. And I noticed there's something about a silt rail fence. I have no idea what that is. I want to know what's going to be in my backyard, basically.
All right. I will ask.
Okay. I guess they're going to put new fencing in. I have no,
Okay.
so that's what I'd like to know. Anything else?
Yeah, my name is Pat Tully, 279 Lincoln Avenue, Tully. My concern is that the houses are definitely going to be side by side, and both driveways are coming out onto 4th Street. Is that correct? Am I looking at the plans correctly? Because the garages are attached to the homes, is that what I heard?
Correct.
So both driveways are coming out onto 4th. There's not going to be any way that a driveway could be put someplace else on the property?
No.
No.
No. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else like to be heard on this application? No? Mr. Tramarko?
All I can say is Mr. Heinrich will build a beautiful house, or two beautiful houses, and I think the community will be much better off with two houses than this old house that's there now. Thank you.
I think you had a question about a silt fence, but the silt fence is just something that goes up during construction.
Where's the fence?
It's a requirement during construction.
When they're regrading, to make sure if there's any water runoff, that it doesn't run any.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. We have to comply with, what do you call it, Arthur? The silt fence. Silt fence will be put up so that runoff is contained within the property
And
line.
then comes down when the construction's over.
Right.
And I'm assuming then he'll put up fencing to delineate the properties.
There is fencing.
I guess. I mean, that would be up to the builder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Mark Heinrich, Heinrich, Vice President. The property is completely fenced already on all sides. So that fencing is all going to remain, unless, during construction we damage it or something like that, but the property is completely fenced and self-contained, so we're not going to be going beyond any of that fencing.
All right.
Okay?
Yep, thank you. Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second?
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
The next case on the agenda is case number 18264, Robert and Jan Oberg, 7 Colonial Drive, Smithtown. The location of the property is the east side of Colonial Drive, 273 feet south of Oak Lawn Drive. The property is zoned R21. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum front yard from 50 feet to 43 feet for a proposed 120-square-foot front porch addition.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Vincent Tramarko. I represent the applicants, Robert and Jan Oberg, who will become new members of the Smithtown community as soon as they finish the alterations that they're doing to the house, which have been permitted, except for this porch, which requires a 7-foot variance. The house is kind of a plain house, and the Obergs felt that putting a porch on the front will kind of dress it up a little bit, be within the character of the area, and make sense for them to do it while they're doing all the permitted alterations on the house in the rear. It's certainly not an undesirable change in the character of the area. It's a desirable change. Whether the applicant can achieve this by some other method. Well, a front porch has got to be on the front of the house, and it either the board allows it or it doesn't, but you can't put it anywhere else. Whether the requested area variance is substantial, we don't think so. If the board or some of its members looked at the area, the house is set back, it's treed, so it's not going to intrude on any other houses in the area, much less on the road. Whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the environment, it's a porch with a roof over. It has no environmental effect. There's no bathrooms, no water to it. It probably will have electric to it, but that's it. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, we haven't built the porch. We're asking the board for its favorable consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
No question.
Planning?
No, thank you.
No. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second. Moving second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18265, Bassarin Grinder Corp., 100 Laser Court, Hauppauge. The location of the property is the east side of Laser Court, 260 feet south of Wireless Boulevard. The property is owned LI. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum rear yard from 50 feet to 23 feet for a proposed 5,742 square foot first floor addition.
Good evening.
No, both.
Hello, my name is Michael Macrina. I'm the architect for Saref Bassaran.
Before you start, are you the owner, sir? Yes, sir. I need you first.
Good evening. I'm Sharef Basharan. I'm the Smithtown resident and live in 292 Bow Drive in Smithtown. And also I'm the owner of the corporation as well as the building.
And you would like this gentleman to speak on your behalf?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, introduce yourself again, please.
My name is Michael Macrina from Michael Macrina Architect. My office is located at 21 Main Street, Stony Brook, New York. Last name is Macrina. My client, Saref Bassaran, is requesting an area variance to reduce the required rear yard setback from 50 feet to 23 foot 10 inches. The reason for this request is to expand the manufacturing side of his business to support the increased demand of his products. In order to organize his production, it will require a 90-foot by 50-foot linear-shaped addition set perpendicular to the rear side of his building, plus another area for his shipping department. We feel there is no other option for the location and size of the addition in order to maintain the required parking spaces, proper turnaround space for delivery trucks, and the minimum space needed for the manufacturing itself. The addition will not produce any negative impacts on the adjacent property since the property line is heavily landscaped with tall evergreen trees, and the adjacent property to the east is a parking lot with a building approximately 211 feet away from the property line, and the adjacent building to the south is also a parking lot with a building approximately 48 feet from the property line. The request is not substantial because the addition is 28 feet tall when a 35-foot tall building is allowed and will still maintain a substantial setback to the property line. And also the property is very level, so it would not create any impact with drainage or any environmental issues. To understand how important the increased manufacturing space is to my client, he has decreased his interior office space by approximately 1,100 square feet to increase the manufacturing side within the existing footprint. I respectfully request for the board to understand the hardship my client has faced with an order to maintain his residency in the same building where he established his business. Thank you.
All right. We were at the site yesterday. You have a lot of cleanup to do in the back there.
We still have, and I need the room.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Very nice.
Those dumpsters that sit over the curb line in the back, are those yours?
Those are ours, those are containers, we have machine parts in it. Obviously, if we get this extension granted, they will be removed, and then, so whatever inside of it is gonna be used up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, those are ours, yes. I have no other room to put it.
Yeah.
As
But
of-
is that your property, though?
Yes. Some of it, 23 feet, half of the containers on our property, the other half on the neighbor's property, which has been 20 years, is there.
Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions on the application?
No, thank you.
Planning?
Just one comment, Mr. Chairman. Planning recommends that due to the fact that this is in the industrial park and that the town does, try its best to maintain a certain standard for setbacks, buildings, and so forth, that the request not exceed a 50% reduction of the rear yard. I know you're talking about 2 feet, but at the request they're at now, they're asking for about a 54 or a 55% reduction of the rear yard. So our recommendation is not to exceed 50%.
Would that hurt you at all?
Not really, it's, we'll be happy to comply with that, we have no issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what would the request be then, 27 feet?
20,
25.
25.
It would be from 50 to 25.
Yeah, it's just 1 foot.
And they
14
could.
Okay, I got it. I got
I
it.
guess they could tweak the design of the addition where they could possibly maintain the same square footage.
They'd probably lose one
but
parking
just-
space.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18266, John Malazzo, 28 Croft Lane, Smithtown. The location of the property, the west side of Croft Lane, 1,033 feet north of Creek Road. The property is zoned R43. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum side yard from 24 feet to 5 feet, to increase the maximum height from 15 to 17 feet for a proposed 484 square foot garage.
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Very well.
Good. My name is John Malazzo, I'm the applicant. I'm also the owner of the property. I submitted with my application 3-page narrative answering your questions. I can go through them briefly, but however you want me to proceed, I will. The only thing I want to note is on the narrative, it talked about 74-foot distance between the garage and my southerly property line. That actually should be 72.2, so it'll stay the same. So what I'm proposing to do is replace a garage that's there with one that's 2 feet bigger in all directions. So the one that's there is 20 by 20. This will be 22 by 22. I will shift the northerly wall of the garage 2 feet to the north on my property to maintain the existing 72 feet of distance between my southerly line and the garage. The height will also increase from 13.5 feet to 17 feet. The area variance considerations are all satisfied in this case, I believe. It will not produce an undesirable impact on the neighborhood or the character of the community. It's a horse community. Most of the people in my neighborhood have larger garages or accessory structures than what I have. It's also a little bit in need of repair, so this will be a new structure that will be aesthetically pleasing from the road, 2 feet higher than the permitted height under the zoning code, but I don't think that variance is substantial when you note the next door neighbor to the north has an 18-foot garage, accessory building, and the one to the south is much larger, as shown by one of the photos in my application. there's a fence between my northerly neighbor and the proposed garage wall, which is a 6-foot vinyl, so he won't see an additional 2 feet because the vinyl fence will block his view. The request is not substantial because it's 90% degree of relief as compared to the existing condition and 13% relief as to relative height. So again, I have a garage that can be rebuilt under existing variance granted by this board. I'm just asking it to move it over a little bit and make it a little bit taller. There's no other benefit, there's no other way to achieve this benefit, just given that the garage is there. And both of my neighbors have built all of their structures. Let me start that over. My neighbor to the south has a large riding area, and then my neighbor to the north has a large riding area in both of their properties, which were constructed after my garage was built and also after the variance was granted by this board. It won't have an adverse impact on them. In the environmental impact, it's a type 2 action, so it's exempt. And then it's not self-created because my garage was here, and then the 2 riding areas were installed after this garage was built.
Since you're knocking the garage down, would it be a burden on you to shift it to the south rather than to the north?
It would be a burden in that if I move it towards the southerly side, I would have to take out, there's 4 large evergreens on my property. I would end up moving the garage further into the middle of my lot, which would be using up the usable space between my area and my southerly neighbor, who has a large riding area with horse activity all the time. So you'd be pushing me closer to him for the little area of lawn area I'd have between the southerly wall of the garage and his northerly property line.
Yeah, I'm not talking a lot, just a couple of feet.
Any distance would be substantial in that you're shortening the active area of my backyard.
Okay.
If I had to shift it, I mean, I have the right to rebuild the one in place, in kind.
Mhm. Right.
So that's a, you know, if that's the will of the board, I may have to do the other.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyone on the board have any questions?
No, thanks.
Planning?
Just one, what is the current setback of the existing garage to your neighbor to the north?
7 feet.
7 feet.
I'm sorry, so I'm going from 7 to 5. The southerly side will stay the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which
sorry?
side? You going,
So the southerly line is going to stay the same.
right,
The northerly line will go 2 feet closer to my northerly neighbor.
right, it'll go from 7 to 5.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? You have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor? Motion carried.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18267, GRMS Realty LLC, Marie Morena, 102 Main Street, Kings Park. The location of the property, the south side of Main Street, 100 feet east of Pulaski Road. The property is zoned CB. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum rear yard from 50 feet to 3.5 feet for an existing rear building. Reduce the required buffer yard setback from a residence district from 50 feet to 3.5 feet. Reduce the required width of a two-way driveway from 20 feet to 12.2 feet. Reduce the minimum parking setback from a side property line from 6 feet to 2.3 feet. Reduce the minimum required truck loading spaces from 1 to 0. Reduce the required parking spaces from 17 to 5. For a change of use from residential to office with site alterations.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Jacqueline Peranto. I'm with Key Civil Engineering. I'll be representing the applicant this evening.
Is this young lady the applicant?
The owner is here, and I'm going to hand in my...
first?
My name is Maureen Morena. How are you?
Fine. Would you like this young lady to speak on your behalf?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I just turned in our mailing notifications and sign postings. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name's Jacqueline Pronto, Key Civil Engineering, 664 Blue Point Road, Holtzville, New York, representing the property owner, GRMS Realty LLC, who has owned the property since 2004. The conditions that we are here tonight seeking variances for have existed on this property for over the last 40 years. The subject property is known as 102 Main Street in Kings Park, Suffolk County Tax Map Number, District 800, Section 14, Block 3, Lot 32, and the property is zoned CB, Central Business. The property is located on the southwest side of Main Street, also known as New York State Route 25A in Kings Park. The subject property consists of 2 buildings. There's a 2-story building located in the front of the property, and it has a retail use on the first floor, currently a jewelry store of 930 square feet, and a second floor is a 1-bedroom apartment, 708 square feet. There is a 2-way driveway that leads to a rear parking area, which consists of 5 parking stalls, including 1 ADA stall. And there's a 1-story, 617 square foot office building that's located in the rear of the site. There is also currently a shed in the rear of the property that will be removed. The variances that we are here for tonight are as follows. The reduction of the rear yard from 50 foot to 3.5 foot, as well as the reduction of the rear yard buffer from 50 foot to 3.5 foot. And I believe the board does all have plans in front of them. I brought a large exhibit in case.
We do.
So as you'll see, the 3.5-foot rear yard setback and buffer exists along this property line. Because of the use being office, it will not have excessive noise, odor, or light pollution. Again, this structure has been there for over 40 years, so we don't see it as an impact to the environment. The rear yard encroachment has not previously produced any adverse impacts, and we don't anticipate that it will. This benefit cannot be achieved in any other alternative other than the removal of the structure. The third variance that we're seeking tonight is for the parking spaces. Based on the town code, 17 parking spaces are required for the retail use, office use, and residential apartment. There is a public parking field located at the Smithtown train station, which is about 700 feet away, and provides for overflow parking for some of their employees, should that be needed. Also, the apartment use needs that parking in the evening, and in the daytime, that vehicle is not expected to be parked there, so that balances itself. We feel that the 5 parking stalls will be adequate based on the tenants and number of employees that the current jewelry store has. We don't really feel that that there's another alternative to provide any additional parking. We did even look at the option of, if the rear building was to be removed, would we be able to pick up enough parking spaces to meet the needs of the 2-story building in the front, and we would still be deficient in parking, and we would still require some of the other variances that we're seeking this evening. So we don't see that as a viable option. The next variance that we're seeking is the minimum number of loading spaces, where 1 space is required, 0 is provided. Again, because this use is retail and office, the deliveries that are expected would be perhaps a FedEx truck or an Amazon van delivery, so something of a Sprinter van or a box truck, which, if needed, could park in one of the parking spaces and would be a quick and short stop drop-off. So again, we don't really feel that a dedicated loading space is warranted or needed, and we don't anticipate more than 1 delivery per day. If we were to provide a loading space, we would just be reducing the parking more, and we feel that it's better suited as a parking space. The next variance that we're seeking is in regard to the side buffer between the parking and the side property line. 6 feet is required by code, where 2.3 feet has been in existing condition, again, for over 40 years. The property of which we are adjacent to is a restaurant, another commercial business. The buffered 2.3 feet has a retaining wall in that area, and it's densely planted. We feel that it's best to keep that condition as is. If we were to widen the buffer, we'd be reducing the drive aisle, and on a small lot, we feel it's better to have that extra room for on-site circulation. The next variance and final variance that we are seeking tonight is the minimum access driveway width. 20-foot minimum width is required. Currently, that driveway is 12.2 feet wide, and it does act as a two-way driveway to bring the vehicles to the rear parking lot. We do feel that since this is existing and the traffic patterns are existing, it's a condition that has been working, and we feel it will continue to work. We are proposing a sidewalk adjacent to the building, so we're planning to remove the landscaping that's currently between the building and the curb and put in a sidewalk. And we think that will provide a safer means of path for the customers in the back parking lot to access the front door of the retail store. Due to the placement of that two-story building, there is a 19.4-foot setback from the building to the property line, so it would be impossible to meet the 20-foot requirement without the removal of the primary building on the property. We feel, so again, we feel that the current situation is best to be maintained as such, and to provide that sidewalk would be an added benefit. And as each of these requested variances are existing nonconformities, we do not feel that they will create any additional any adverse effect on the environment. The difficulty of these variances were not created by this applicant. The difficulty is related to the geometry of the site and the as-built conditions. The lot is very small and narrow. The building sizes and locations are existing, and again, they have been existing for over 40 years. I went back to some archive Google imagery from 1978 that shows both those structures on the property. And I will open it up for questions if the board has any questions for me.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
I don't have any questions. I just like comment. I've lived in Kings Park my entire life, and it's been like this ever since I was around. So it's certainly going to be an improvement, that's for sure.
Planning?
No, thank you.
Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? You have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second. Moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. And that concludes our hearing for tonight.